Welcome back. In this session, we will talk about the importance of the informal sector to achieve a circular economy, and the social benefits that enhancing circular economy can have on the informal sector. At the end of this session, you should be able to know key aspects of the informal sector, understand the importance of the informal sector in SWM, recognize and review mechanisms for informal sector inclusion. In many cities of the developing countries, the informal sector plays a crucial role in managing municipal solid waste. Informal sector waste workers are defined as individuals or small enterprises that intervene in waste management. They are not formally registered and are not formally mandated with providing waste management services, but they are developed and organized. Their predominant activity is in recycling materials from the waste stream. In the recovery of recyclables, they are active throughout the waste management chain, starting at the household as well as scavenging through garbage bins, collection points, or disposal sites. They extract, process, and sell those materials that have high intrinsic value on which they can make some profit. Waste pickers are most of the time driven by poverty, marginalized, and exposed to high health risks. Despite the benefits of their activities for municipalities, they are most of the time ignored in solid waste management policies. In most developing countries, the informal recycling sector is structured like a pyramid. At the bottom of the waste trade pyramid are the waste pickers, who engage in the free collection of waste from municipal garbage bins, streets, and disposal sites. Above them are the scrap buyers, who purchase or collect small quantities of waste, such as plastic, paper, glass or metals, from households or small shops that buy from waste pickers. In several countries, households may also sell their recyclable waste to itinerant buyers in street shops. A new trend, for instance, are waste banks where residents can bring their recyclables for a price. Above that are then different levels of traders, including retailers, stockists, and wholesalers, many of whom are also informal, not registered as businesses. Materials recovered by the informal valorization sector are sold into the industrial value chain. This may even be to international customers, such as the metal recycling, which is then often shipped to China. Trade gets more specialized as it moves up the pyramid. At every successive level, waste is sorted more specifically and processed, hereby more value is added. A study by the Collaborative Working Group on Solid Waste Management in collaboration with the German Society for International Cooperation, GIZ, conducted a detailed study in different cities worldwide to assess the importance and contribution of the informal sector. Here is a graph on the average cost savings for each municipality showing 6 major cities. You can see that depending on the city, the cost savings for the municipality range between 1 to 16 million euros per year. Major savings relate to the effect of recycling before collection. If material is recovered through door-to-door collection or as close to the source of generation as possible, then this material no longer needs to be collected, transported, and disposed of, and thus saves costs. Given the typical practice of open dumping, and thus low expenditures for disposal, the savings by recycling at the landfill are mostly related to space saving and extending the lifespan of the landfill. Then there are also other cost savings, which are a bit more difficult to monetize, such as the savings due to substitution of primary raw materials. Estimates of the savings in externalities are shown here for 3 cities, ranging from 2.4 million in Quezon City, up to 7.2 million for Lima. For the informal sector, fostering or supporting circular economy, and therefore the secondary resource economy, offers important opportunities, such as job creation, fighting poverty, by improving the skills of waste pickers to add value to the materials they collect, and business development. With appropriate assistance, informal waste pickers could become small-scale entrepreneurs for recycling non-hazardous waste. Now that we have seen the potentials of including the informal sector in waste management, it is time to see what the key steps are to be taken to include the informal sector in waste management effectively. Among these are policy making for the informal sector, Strengthening the organizational capacities of the IS. Strengthening the informal sector, IS, as an economic actor. Partnerships between the formal and informal private sectors. We will now look at each of them in more detail and see what they are all about. Since the main characteristic of the informal waste sector is its invisibility, a major element in strengthening the integration of the informal sector is to raise awareness among policymakers of its work and possible contributions to an appropriate waste management system, as well as the important aspects to be considered when integrating them. Experience, particularly in India and Brazil, clearly shows that the establishment of adequate legal structures and the process of informal sector integration go hand in hand. The adaptation of laws, regulations, and bylaws at the federal, state, and municipal levels to the requirements of a successful integration process paves the way for further developments. Facilitating the organization and formal recognition of waste sector workers through identity cards, as people in the informal sector are often undocumented, migrants or on the margins of society, or through associations and cooperatives, like in these two examples from Mozambique and Brazil, or enterprises, is essential so that they can collectively improve the factors that lead to economic and social dignity, and have voice to represent them in local, national, and international policy, as well as regulatory and collective bargaining forums. The result will be better working conditions, income for waste pickers, resource recovery, and a more sustainable environment. The activities of the informal sector are often economic, since it sometimes buys, but mostly resells certain materials. Therefore, it is important to provide information on markets and prices for recycling to informal workers. Creating opportunities for resource recovery directly by the informal sector is also important, because to ensure the long-term success of informal sector organizations, it is sometimes important to ensure the diversity of the group's activities in order to be less subject to fluctuations in the market prices of certain materials, for example, and also to use technical specializations that add value to the materials, as discussed earlier. Of course, the activities to be taken into account will depend on the local context and markets. It is therefore advisable to analyze the feasibility of improving recycling in the informal sector and launching new recycling activities. Is there a market for the potential product? What would be the selling price and profits? Etc. Finally, it is also important to establish partnerships with the private sector to improve linkages between the informal sector and industrial value chains. Linkages can be with formal waste producers such as industries, for example, with firms that subsequently resell to industries, directly, etc., as well as with the private sector. To summarize everything that has been seen so far, it can be said that there are several possible scenarios for the integration of the informal sector. Status quo and no interference waste pickers continue to play their current role as a largely marginalized and unregulated community, recovering value at little or no cost to the value chain. Independent entrepreneurs, informal waste pickers are recognized as independent entrepreneurs, which must largely operate in their current form, with some level of increased control and monitoring, registration, protective equipment, and increased support. Formalization. Governments and businesses are working to formalize the informal sector by creating cooperatives and SMEs that take responsibility for supporting business development. Employment. The formal waste and recycling sector conducts a labor-intensive collection, sorting, and recycling process, based on an employment model of absorbing informal waste pickers into new businesses as employees. This is it for this session on the informal sector. Let's summarize what we heard about. We saw that the informal sector, even if it is often neglected by local authorities, play an important role in SWM by increasing waste recovery and generating important cost savings for municipality thanks to their activities. We also saw that there are several social benefits of enhancing secondary resources economy, such as job creation, poverty alleviation, and enterprise and entrepreneurship development. We then saw 4 key steps for integrating the informal sector, starting with policy making to give visibility to the work of the informal sector, followed by strengthening the organizational capacity, as well as strengthening the IS as economic actor. And finally, allowing partnership between the formal and informal private sector. We also saw the different scenarios for informal sector integration, going from the status quo with no interference and no improvement of living conditions, to full absorption of the informal workers as employees. As always, don't hesitate to go through additional resources if you want to know more. Thank you for listening.